Aloha mai kako. Aloha. This is an information briefing. And now in this case, it's about the Mokuhano cluster development. You know, legally, the way the law is now, the way it is right now, the developer, the city and county, they don't have to tell you guys anything. It doesn't say you got to go to the neighborhood board. It doesn't say you got to have a public hearing. It just says you just follow all of these different permitting processes. So will you join me in welcoming Mr. Tanoi?
Thank you, everybody. Aloha and good evening. I'd like to thank Representative Ward for putting this together and giving me the opportunity to come up here and discuss it with you. What was applied for was a cluster housing permit for that parcel. It's approximately the residentially zoned aspect of the parcel is just under 3 acres. They're proposing 26 dwelling units, multifamily with duplexes and fourplexes, things like that. A total of 26 units. Under the cluster process, right now, as a matter of right, under the land use ordinance, you can build up to 8 homes on a single lot if you have the appropriate size. So, for example, in R5 zoning, the 5 stands for 5,000 minimum square feet for the lot itself. So, say you have a lot that's 42,000 square feet. So you have enough you can build up to 8 homes as a matter of right. No special discretionary permit, no special permit, just to make sure that you have the adequate access and you meet all the building code requirements for setbacks and things like that. So in this case, there's always the option of trying to, you can go to the cluster process and request additional density if you want. In this case, the size of the lot really is very close to the amount of homes they're requesting. It's basically about 4,000, on average 4,850 square feet per dwelling unit on this one, so it's very close to the R5 standards. But the cluster, generally the cluster option is used in situations where you need to try to have a more efficient design, especially when there's usually topographical obstacles in the way. You have steep land, on the side of a mountain, and you have some flat areas, and you need to cluster the housing together in a certain area and try to maximize, be more efficient with the design. So in this case, the developers came in for a cluster permit application for 26 units. They actually presented this project, I want to say, but I'm not sure, at least a year ago. We have a process called a 21-day preview with the department. As Representative Ward mentioned, that there is no requirement to present it to the neighborhood board in the cluster projects application process. We always recommend to applicants that they should present to the neighborhood board, but it's an option. You guys look like fine folks. I don't know why they never came out and showed it to you. And in the 21-day review, we did comment on certain things like the spacing of the buildings. We wanted more open space. We wanted to make sure that the park area that's required was on the property itself in the area by the homes. When we got the cluster application in, it was basically almost the same design. So, saw our approval. And as Representative Ward mentioned, at this point, it's just the application of the law to the project, making sure that they meet all the requirements. Where they don't, we want them to, make adjustments as part of the conditions to the project. It's things that they proposed was a meeting facility on a portion of the land. That portion of the parcel was zone preservation. A meeting facility is not allowed, so we told them that you have to take that out. But on the preservation portion of the parcel, they also were presenting outdoor recreation facilities, like the park site facilities. And we said that's okay, but if you're going to do outdoor recreation on preservation zone land, P2 zone land, you need a conditional use permit minor, so they need to come in for that. We also did things like require them to put the required park area on the site itself, on where the residential development is being done. That's probably going to result in more spacing of the buildings and more open space. The project is intended to be within the building envelope for single-family residents. It meets all the, whenever we do a cluster permit application, we run the application through all the various agencies like Board of Water Supply, Fire, and they all and receive comments back, and everything checks out okay. So as far as the need for the concern for water, there's adequate water. More technical details will come out during the building permit review process. Likewise, fire. Fire puts on its, the standard. We need a fire access lane, this wide, so and so, stuff like that, and those things will come out during the building permit review process. Just for your information, the property has been zoned residential for at least since 1968 or so. It was part of a large parcel before, and it was I think Class A residential back in '68. No, I think it was part of a large parcel of property, which was preservation. But that remnant piece, it's true that at one time it was meant to be the extension of Hawaii Drive. If you look at it, the linear aspect of it and the continuation, but when that portion of I guess the overall big project didn't go through, then that extension was abandoned. But that portion of that area was zoned R5. So that's why out of the whole parcel, only 2.92 acres is zone R5. As far as the visual aspect, yeah, we don't have any. There's no private right to view, and what they're building would be allowed as a single-family residence. They're under the 25-foot height limit required, so they could put single-family residence up to 20.
How tall will these stand?
24 feet. My recollection is 24 feet. Entrance and exit is on Mokuhano. Land entitlement, the procedures go through, and it starts from what we call discretionary, way up at like the zone change, where you can add those conditions or things like that, trying to mitigate things that, for the community. And as you get down the scale, you get all the way down to the ministerial, which you have no say, basically like a building permit. We can't, even though you have the ugliest house you're going to plan on building, you can't say anything, because as long as you meet code.
But the law is no one has to tell us anything, and that's what we're trying to change.
As one of the conditions, and actually standard for any kind of this kind of construction project, is requiring a traffic management plan to be approved by the department, and that's for the construction period, and to make sure that we review how much loads, what they expected to come in, and we want to make sure it's not peak hours. We also record the conditions of the road, so that they repair the roads after. I read a fact earlier this year, and then last year was one of those unusual years where more people moved out of Hawaii than moved into Hawaii, but yet our population across the state increased by almost 20,000. That's half Hawaiian. So it's because the birth rates outrated the death rates. So even in a down year, people not moving to Hawaii, we were still increasing, and we will continue. Our population doesn't stop, and we need to make sure that we try and, in the core areas, primarily Kapolei and the urban core downtown, for redevelopment, infill, more density and things like that. That's the only way we can continue to keep up with the demands on housing. You go down the scale, there's less and less say. Zoning, you have a say, things like that, you have a say. And when they use conditional use zoning, height limits, need a new fire station for this neighborhood, things like that. But as you go down the scale, you get to the point where it's ministerial, where you don't have a say if your neighbor is building an ugly house, as long as it's built to code. Yeah, so this is one of those. As long as they meet the requirements as far as spacing and things like that, design stuff.
Itself, is there any other than having these meetings and sending a letter to you guys? Is there anything beyond that?
It's like submitting comments and things like that, so the plan can be that we can look at it, and if it's that we can have them, take a look at it or adjust it, things like that, how the view. But we are ourselves limited because, like I mentioned on the scale, this is down at the ministerial end. In this situation, though, for a cluster application, you're not required to do a presentation to the neighborhood board. Change the law to require that pre-application presentation.